Hey everyone, Caleb with the Antique Book Collective, and as promised, I'm getting to you guys with the deeper dive where I explain my 19 tips, I explain some stories, I explain a little bit more than what I could do in the first video. That being said, if you guys have not seen the first video that I made, this is 19 tips on negotiating prices at estate sales. Please be sure to check that video out. I will be linking it right here-ish. It'll be a little card. You can click that. You can open up the other video. I highly recommend you watch that one first because this one might be a little bit boring if you don't know those 19 tips. Again, I'm not going to be doing the quick list form as I did in the other video. If you want the quick list form, check out that video. This one is where I dive in a little deeper and I explain why that works and I explain the stories on how I've had those things work, and that is sort of going to be more towards the people that have already seen that first video. So all that said and done, I'm just going to dive right on in. So as I said in the first video, my first tip that I have is to offer to pay your different bills for all of the different books that you buy or whatever else you buy at these estate sales. Offer to pay these things with small bills, small denominated bills. And not just that, but offer to pay in spare change. Because you'd be surprised how many times you can pick up a book for just a couple pennies or a couple quarters when they were initially asking a couple dollars for these things. The reason why they do that is sometimes these different estate sales, they don't have the money on hand to do all these things. And I know I went over that in the last video, but let me just tell you guys, I've actually had this work so many times, and this generally works for me the best when I'm at an estate sale for an extended period of time. I'm talking like 15 minutes at least, and upwards to a couple of hours going through the same estate sale. The longest I've spent in any estate sale was maybe like 4 hours, and over the amount of time that you spend there, so between 15 minutes and a couple hours, you're going to understand sort of how that estate sale works, how that company works, all that sort of thing, and you might overhear them talking and being like, oh, hey, we're running low on change. I think we need to go to the bank. Or they'll say something along those lines. You might hear that. I've heard that quite a few times. Generally, I've had more luck with those kind of sales where they actually say those things in smaller towns where the bank is further away and where it's more of a stress to actually go to the bank. And those are the places where I've actually had my best luck, is the small towns where I'm like, hey, I heard you guys saying that you don't have much change on hand. So what if I bought these books right now? I have a whole bunch of ones. I have a whole bunch of fives, just smaller denominated bills. And I'm like, oh, I saw you're low on quarters. What if I buy in that? And then they're like, oh, yes, that'd be so good. And I'm like, well, I'm planning on buying some more books also, so I'm going to be buying a few more things later on. So what if I went and did this and this and this? And since I'm really going out of my way to help you guys, could I have a little bit of a deal? I mean, it's just that natural of a thing. You can just slip in a, can I have a little deal? And honestly, that's a big tip on its own, which honestly I should make another video on just for, can I have your best offer? That'd be a really good one. But at the end of the day, when you guys are doing a favor for these people, they will go out of their way so much of the time to help you out. And even if they don't go out of their way to help you, at the end of the day, you're still being a good person by being like, hey, I see you're in need. How about I help you out? And honestly, guys, if you are going to the bank or however else you're getting your small bills for your business, it's not that hard to just pay with those small bills. I mean, honestly, I find it more difficult to pay in $100 bills and have to explain, oh yeah, this is totally a legit $100 bill, and then they have to get the pen thing, to check that. Or with the new $100 bills, you got to shove like a thing up that security ribbon thing. It's really nifty. If you guys haven't done it yet, the brand new $100 bills have these little ribbons you can put like a pencil lead up. Pretty interesting stuff though. I can't get the lead out to show you guys, but it's neat. But it has, with those security features, it adds a little bit of time. So $20 bills, people have to check everything. $10 bills you even have to check, but like $5 bills people don't normally check because those aren't very counterfeited very often, and $1 bills are like never counterfeited. So the people are willing to trust those more, so it speeds along the transaction, something that you don't normally get when you're doing a $100 bill. And on top of that, you pay with exact change, which again is just helping people out. So all that said and done, guys, try to pay with small bills, try to pay with change, try to pay with exact change wherever you can, whenever you can, because it really helps people out. And honestly, I recommend doing this for not just estate sales and whatnot. Like whenever I go out to eat, I try to pay with exact change, and then I have like a separate pile where I do the tip. It's just a nicer thing to do because you don't have to have the other person go through their change, through the till and be like, oh, let me just count this out. Thanks a lot. It's pretty easy. And All that said and done, though, don't use your debit card for that. I'll explain that later in another bit of the tips. So next tip, though, is only show your small bills when you are in the estate sale, and especially when you're paying. So when you only have small bills that you pull out, and this is a tip I've seen and heard quite a few times, and it's something I've used, is have your 20s, your 100s, your 50s, whatever your large bills are, have them in one pocket. And then with your other pocket, have all your ones, your twos, your fives. And yes, there are $2 bills. Here's proof. They're pretty cool. Not very common, so I've actually gotten some good deals for books when I pay with $2 bills because the people want the $2 bills. So that's another cool tip right there. But back to what I was saying about only show your small bills. So if you are only showing these people that you have small bills on you at the moment that you're paying, they will be more apt, trust me guys, they'll be more apt to accept your negotiating because they'll be like, oh, this person only has this much money on them. If you only have like this thick of a stack of ones, they'll be like, okay, this guy only has like $50 maybe. I don't know. And because they only know that you have that much, they'll be more apt to be like, okay, yeah, I'll budge on my price a little bit. If you have this much, yeah, I'll accept whatever you have. And when you're doing that, I mean, you're not really being dishonest. You didn't say this is all the money I have, but you are showing that you only have small bills on you, and that's all they know. And honestly, that's all that you really need them to know if you're buying a few books, because they don't need to know your entire financial statement. So all that said and done, guys, I've actually done this one quite a few times. And actually, when I have my wallet on my person, I have a $1 bill on one side and a $1 bill on the other side. And for me, I'm a rather organized person, so I organize my wallet in ones and then twos and then fives and then tens, 20s, 50s, hundreds. So that's how I organize it. But when I open up my wallet, if anyone's looking in my wallet, they see a 1 on the far side, and then if they're behind me, they'll see a 1 on the close side. So when they see that, they're like, oh, this guy only has a wallet full of ones, whereas I have a lot of the times I've actually carried like upwards to like $3,000 on me when I'm doing big sale trips. And yes, I have spent a lot of money on some of those big sale trips. I've had a whole lot of fun. One of the best ones that I went to was actually, so I live down in Portland area, and there is up in Washington, there's a place called Tri-Cities where it's Richmond, Kennewick, and Pasco, I think it is. I'm sure I'm getting those names wrong, so I'm sorry, everyone in Tri-Cities. But there's an area there, and I went to an estate sale. Actually, it was a church sale for books. And when I pulled out my wallet, they saw just the small bills on hand, and they actually threw out a number to me when they saw those small bills and like, oh yeah, we'll just charge you this much. And for me, that was really good because that particular sale was absolutely fan-stinking-tastic, and I'm going to be going back to that one as soon as I can. I actually missed it the past like 2 years because all the lockdowns, but it was a fantastic sale, guys. So if pro tip right here, if you can find some church book sales, they're amazing, absolutely like stunning amazing. So again, just pro tip right there. But back to that, they saw I only had small bills on either side, so like, oh yeah, we'll just accept this much for your books. And for me, I had picked up, I want to say, sorry, I'm thinking right now, I think I picked up about 8 boxes of books, and I got a box right here. All right, so just looking at that, I would say at least 30 books could probably fit in the boxes that I had. Of course, that's not the box that I did in that sale, but roughly about 30 books at a minimum in each box. So, I mean, we're talking hundreds upon hundreds of books. And they're like, oh yeah, we'll cut you this deal. And that particular deal that they cut me was like half off or even more. I can't even remember how much it was, but it was like, oh wow, I made out so big. And it was partially because I was nice, partially because all the other reasons that I go through in this list. But one of the reasons that I'm pretty confident of is because I only showed them that I had small bills. Or at least that's what they thought, at least. So on to the next tip, rounding down with your prices. So I have been to a lot of estate sales where I grab a chunk of books and they are doing all the math. They're counting out all the books, and they eventually get to the end and like, all right, your total is, let's see, da-da-da-da-da. They show me the number. They're like, all right, your total's 180. And I'm like, hey, what if I talked you down to just 150? And that's not too big of a talk down. I mean, that's just $30 off. It's not terrible, but it makes it so when I'm paying in my expenses, when I'm paying them off, I'm giving them all the bills. It makes it so I don't have to count as many bills, and I've done this on many occasions. Generally, I've only had this really work at estate sales that are like the higher end of things, where I don't know why, but like that's just sort of how it's worked. So I actually went to this one estate sale in this like secluded gated neighborhood, and it was pretty cool. I got all these things, and I get to the end, and I have this stack of some cool O. Henry books, which are old like books from the early 1900s up to the mid 1900s ish. So I had a stack of those, and like, oh yeah, so 25 of those, and then X much for these and these and these and these, and I'd say it probably ended up being $120 or something. I'm like, all right, what if I did it for this? And they accepted the offer, and that was pretty nice for me because I was really excited to do it. And one of the reasons is another reason I went over, go over in this list is I was also just nice and helpful at that sale, so they were willing to cut me more of a deal. So just be sure, guys, when you are getting your prices, you can round down a bit. And the worst they can do is say no. They won't take your rounded down offer. Odds are they will still accept you as a buyer. They'll be like, oh, yeah, we can't do it for that much. You have to pay the full price. And then you pay the full price. Like, I've never had someone be like, no, I'm not going to take your price. Leave my place right now. So all that said and done, guys, round down. It can't hurt, honestly. So on to the next tip. Show up on the last day. So I've done this one on so many times. And quick story, so there is one estate sale near me. So I actually don't live in Portland. I live in Gresham, which is a suburb. There's like 150,000 people or something like that. And then there's another part, if you go just a couple miles over, there's this other city called Boring. And it just meshes right into Gresham. I don't even know where the line is. I don't know if anyone actually knows what the city line is, to be honest, because it's like such a perfect mesh. And in Boring, I went there for an estate sale, and there was this one guy who was a cool church leader, and he was also the sheriff for a while, I guess. And I had a lot of fun going to this guy's sale. It was one that I had found on, I think it was estatesales.org. Might have been estatesales.net. I used both of them. But I went to this one on the very first day, and I go through the entire guy's house. I grab all these books, and then I'm like, all right, I'm going to check out this barn they have. So I go to the barn, and their barn was like a finished barn. So I was going around, found out that they had an upstairs. So I went to the upstairs, found a bunch more books. And I was walking out on the very first day with, I'd say, at least 100 books. And I was able to sell those books for some pretty good prices. Like across the board, I got them for really good prices. It was a really good deal all the way around. But there were some books that I was looking at. I'm like, I can't make a whole lot of money on those, but they're really nice. I wonder if I can get them later. So I was like, well, it's not that far from my home. I think it was like a 10-minute drive maybe from my home to get to that place. And there's like zero traffic because it's getting out towards the sticks. So I was like, I'll just come back tomorrow or the next day or whatever the last day was. And I'll come back for these. If they're still there, it's meant to be. If not, then no loss. So I bought those first round of books, and I got them all listed on eBay. Back then I was doing Amazon FBA still, so I actually listed the others on Amazon FBA. I got them all packaged up, and I was getting ready to send them off, but I was like, all right, I'm going to go back to the sale really quick before I send off these Amazon FBA books. So I went back, and I go there. I'm just going through, checking out the books. I'm talking to the family, because the family was actually the ones hosting this sale, and I had talked to them the first day, and like, hey, you're back, da-da-da-da-da. And they were getting tired. They were getting ready for everything to go, and they were pulling out like all the heavier things that they really wanted to see go. And one of those stacks of the heavier things they wanted to really see go was books. And I'm like, oh yeah, I actually came here for the books again. Is this all you guys have left? And they're like, oh yeah, we pulled the ones from up in the attic of the barn. We pulled them from here and here and here. So yeah, we're one where you want to see them go. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll totally take them. I'm interested in this one and this one and this one. Those few right there look pretty good, and that one and that one. And like, how about you just take them all? I'm like, okay, how much do you want for it? And they said, free. And I was like, well, I can afford free. And we had a good laugh about that whole sort of thing. And I took all those books, and I actually ended up selling, I think, every single one of them. And for anyone that's been doing this for a while, if you get free books, generally they're not very good quality, but I actually was able to make some pretty good money on them. So I was very happy. I actually kept some of the books to read later, which I still haven't gotten to some of them, but I did read a few. Honestly, I wish I'd get to more of them. I got a to be read pile. I got several that are yay high. Trust me, guys, when you're a reader, this is the best business for you, but it's also the worst business for you because you'll find stuff that interests you. And for me, I'm also a little bit of a homesteader prepper at heart, so I've actually got some cool books on like homesteading and all these things that are like 100 years old. So I've also got those, and I'm like, love flipping through those, seeing all the cool things, and it's really cool stuff. So all that said and done though, back to what I was saying is show up on the last day, guys. you can either get the books for free or at a severely discounted rate. Generally, I have more luck at just getting a discounted rate. I've only had like 1 or 2 places where they've given me free books, which again was like absolutely amazing, but definitely is anything but guaranteed. So show up on the last day, guys. You can get some really, really good deals. Tip number 5 is another really cool one that I actually have just used this past weekend. And over this past weekend, I used the bundle for bargains tip. And in this particular bundling, you guys might be wondering what that is. And that's when you get a whole bunch of like items or even just a bunch of random items. And you put them all together and you say, hey, I'll give you this much for this option. Or as I did in this particular situation, is I grabbed a set of books and I was like, hey, so I'm taking this whole set of books. Is there any way you can cut me a deal? And by the time that I was doing this, it was already a couple hours into this particular estate sale, and these books had not moved yet, and there was already a couple booksellers that had already grabbed all the other books on this shelf almost, and they had left these particular ones. So excuse me for a smidge. So this particular set is a whole bunch of Oxford books. This is half of them, and this is the other half. So all told, there was quite a few of them, and the people were asking $6 for every single hardcover. And for me, for these books, if at the $6 a pot price, that was, let me just check again really quick, that was $84 for all of these books. I would have had to pay $84 for all of these. And for me, I was actually not very sold on these books, but I was grabbing them only because I had a good feeling that I would be able to bundle them all and get a good price on them. So, $84? Tell me, guys, what do you think I got that down to? Gonna give you a couple seconds. Honestly, drop it down in the description what you would think I could talk them down to, or the price they'd give me for those books. I'm going to give you a couple seconds to write that down. If you guys get it right, I'm going to be absolutely shocked because I actually got a better price than I ever expected to get on these particular books. Those books, all of them, those $84 potentially that I would have had to pay, I only had to pay $25, guys. 25, just 25. No strings, like literally that was it. And that actually was an absolutely astounding price reduction for me. So let me just run the math really quick. So 84 minus 25, that is $59 off right off the top. And once I finished with that estate sale and once they rang up all the other things, I think the total came down to like $162. I actually have the receipt next to me, but I'm not going to check that. But I think it was about that. And I was like, hey, any chance I can get you down to 160? Because I was like, maybe I can do that whole round down thing that I mentioned earlier. And the lady was like, no. I already gave you that $25 thing. That was a pretty good deal. And I was like, yeah, it was. Thank you. So I ended up paying the 160 some dollars. But I got an astounding price. I got to save $59 on a set of books. And guys, $59, that might not sound like a whole lot. I mean, maybe if we're talking $84 down to 25, that's a pretty good chunk. But like in the grand scheme, it might not sound like a lot, especially if you've been in this business for a while. But for that particular set, the profit margin just is not there for me. So honestly, if they weren't going to give me a deal for that, I would have said, yeah, I'm not interested. I'll take them back to your shelf. But I didn't have to do that because they gave me the deal. And I know I didn't actually tell them I'll do this all for a bargain. Sorry, I didn't say I'll do this all for a bundle. I was like, hey, these are all a set. What can I have them for? And they set the price. They gave me it for the $25. I didn't even say $25. Honestly, I probably would have said $50 or something because like I wouldn't have ever expected to get that kind of a deal. I was absolutely shocked to get that kind of a deal, but I got it. And again, as I said, I was extremely happy over this. So guys, when you bundle for bargains, don't always name the price. Ask them, hey, if I take all these off your hands, what will I have to pay? They'll set the price sometimes, and it can be absolutely an amazing price, and I'll talk more about that in another tip. All right, you guys' next tip is be nice and be helpful. So I already mentioned this in another story, but there was a particular estate sale that I went to in that gated community, and there was a lady, and she was running it, and she had one of those Gardenellis or whatever they are, the sparkling cider things, and she could not open it. She didn't have a bottle opener for it, and she was looking, and she's like, oh man, what in the world? I can't find it, She was looking through the entire estate sale, and I had seen her going around as she was there, and I was like, what's she doing? And then eventually she went down to where I was with all the books, and she was talking about, I'm like, oh, yeah, I got a bottle opener for you. And I went to help, and a guy actually cut in front of me and helped her instead. But when I came time to pay, this lady was actually one of the employees, and she's like, "Hey, you're the guy that helped." And I was like, "Well, I didn't actually help. There's another guy that helped you instead." But yeah, I was trying to help. And when I did that, I was next to the cash register, and they heard that. They heard that I was helpful and all that stuff. And I think the lady's husband was at the cash register, and he actually gave me a pretty good price for the O. Henry books that I got and a couple of the other things that I got at that particular sale. So I was really happy with that. I was also just being a nice person, and at the end of the day, I didn't even have to do anything, but they still saw that I was a nice person, and they cut me a good deal for it. So I was really excited about that, guys, and trust me, if you're just a nice person, people will be nice back, and that can actually make you some good money. So on to the next tip, though. Both of you and the person, both of you guys should be happy with the price that you're looking at when you're selling. So if you're not happy with the price when you're giving it to them, like saying, "Hey, I'll take this set of books from you for X much," if you're not happy with that price, it's not going to be a good deal. But if you make it so low that they're not happy with it, it's not a good deal for them. And at the end of the day, you want to find like a happy medium where you're happy with it and you know that they'll be happy with it, or at least you'll figure that both of you guys will be happy with it. And that's really what you guys want to do. And I've actually had quite a few places where I go. One particular place that I have gone quite a few times is down in Prineville, which is Central Oregon. And I've gone there and I was like, "Hey, I've been here a couple times. You guys recognize me?" "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh yeah, we remember you." Sorry, English sometimes. And I was like, "Yeah." So I was the guy that came this one time, and I took all these old books off your hands for X much. And like, "Yeah, we remember that. So anything else you're interested in? Any more sets?" And because I have gone there so many times, first off, you have to build rapport sometimes to get some really good deals. But also because when I took these sets of books, I gave them a really solid price. Like they were asking. I don't remember the exact price, but let's just say they're asking $1 for every hardcover, and let's say there was 30 hardcover books in this particular set. I offered them 20 for the whole set, and yeah, that's not the dollar a piece that they were asking, but $20, that's actually probably better than what other people would have offered. Like if I offered $5, they'd be like, "Oh, that's dumb," but $20 out of 30, that's 2/3 of the way there. 66%, that's not terrible. And honestly, guys, pro tip, 66% is a pretty good price for you to shoot at for when you're making these counter offers. Like, "Hey, I'll take this whole set for just a third off the price." Basically, you can usually swing that, not always, but good amount of time you can swing that. It's different with every place you live, but for me in that particular place, I can make it like a third off, and I can get along pretty fine. Other places I do a half off. Other places 10% off. As you guys remember seeing in that particular Oxford set, I got a whole lot more than half off of that set. So let's do some quick math. That's like, that's over 2/3 off. That was crazy good deal. But yeah, be sure when you're doing these things that you're giving them a price that they are happy with, because when you're doing it and it's an honest price and that both you guys are happy with it, you'll be going back to the sale because you got a good deal, and they'll be happy to see you again because you actually paid money. And for me, that was a Friends of the Library sale. They do it every month, actually. And because they do it every single month, and because I go there so often, I haven't been there as much as I wanted to lately, but because I used to go there every single month, they recognized me. They remembered me. They gave me good deals because of all that. And actually, I was just there not too long ago with my whole family to get some books, and they actually were like, "Oh yeah, here's the deal we're running now, da-da-da-da-da," and got a really good deal. And it wasn't even just because they remembered me, it's just because they have good deals at that place. So that's another thing that's not a tip on this whole list, but guys, be sure to look around. Be sure to check out the small towns around you. Sometimes you can get some like astounding deals going on, and no one else is going because it's so far out of the way. So just a little tip right there on a total aside. So that said and done, guys, mention your situation. So I know that's a weird phrasing, but what I'm saying by that is when you are buying these books for your eBay reselling business or whatever else you're buying at these estate sales, tell them, "Hey, I'm a reseller. Hey, I do this. Hey, I do this." Like, explain what you're doing. Like, of course, don't do this when they're busy. Do this during a slow time, which is another tip later on. But tell them a little bit about yourself and then be like, "Yeah, so with this particular thing that I'm trying to buy right now, this particular book, I can't make a profit with this. So I'm assuming no one else is going to be buying these." And this works especially when you like mix it with a couple of the other tips, as I mentioned earlier. Another tip that you really want to do this one with is like coming on the last day. So if you come on the last day and you have this book that was overpriced, or whatever the other item is that was overpriced, and if it's still overpriced, you're like, "Hey, This book hasn't sold. It's been a whole week. It's been 3 days, however long the sale's been going. It hasn't sold yet. And for me, I haven't been able to buy this one because its price is just way too high for what I can resell it for. However, if you price it down to X, I can buy it. So can we do that? Can we make that a deal? Da, 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 da. And don't undercut it so much that it's dumb for them. Like, give them an honest answer, give them an honest offer. But at the end of the day, guys, trust me, they will negotiate with you pretty well if you explain what you're doing, explain that sort of stuff. And a lot of the times these people are small business owners to begin with. So you being a small business owner and explaining that you're one of them, because having done small business for a long time and having a lot of friends that are, there's a bit of camaraderie going on. It's like, hey, you're just like me because you have a business just like me. So they might be more willing to help you just by explaining that you have a business just like them, that you're one of them. And when you are just like someone else, they'll cut you a deal. So that's your tip. Explain your situation, mention your circumstances, that sort of stuff, and you'll actually get a whole lot better deals. Your next tip is confidence is key. So I've used this one on several occasions, not because I have some false sense of bravado, whatever the word is, sorry. And it's not because I puff up my chest and I'm like, hey, I lowered my voice and I'm going to do this and I'll give you $2 for this. It's not because I do it like that. I mean, I do have my shoulders up. I do look confident, and that is something you guys might want to do, especially if you look all meek and mild. Like, puff up a little bit if you have to look a little more confident. But what I'm doing when I'm going to these sales is I'm like, hey, I am a book reseller. I can't make money when you're doing this price. And as you can tell with just how I'm saying this, it's meshed with the previous tip that I gave. But I'm like, hey, I can't make money with this as it is. I'll give you $2 for it. And I'm confident as I'm giving them that thing. I am giving them eye contact. That's another thing. You don't want to be like shifty eyes and be like, oh, I'll give you $2. You want to be like confident. You want them to see that you know what you're doing. And when you're doing stuff like that, they'll give you better deals. So I've been to a lot of places. One of the fun places that I went to that I did something along these lines was actually in Pendleton. They have this huge, absolutely fantastic sale that I've been to a couple times. It's like honestly one of my favorite ones just because of how big it is and how few of people go there. Like there's a bigger one that they have that goes on in Portland, but I went there once and I'm never going again because there were so many people and the people were jerks and the prices were not that fantastic. I mean, they were good, but they weren't like, oh, wow, this is world changing. So this Pendleton one, conversely, is really stinking good. And I actually went there and I looked at all these antique books after looking at everything else because there was other people buying books to resell. And they always look at all the other things. They never look at the antiques. So I set off antiques all the time till the end. And I grabbed all the other books. I bought all the other books. I actually had to take like 10 trips to go in and out with, what's the hand truck? I think hand trucks, yeah. I went in and out with like several hand trucks full of books, like boxes of books. And then I came back, I went through all the antique books. I'm like, hey guys, so no one's been buying these antique books. I know they're really cool books, but I can't do this, I can't do that. And I will pay this much for all these antique books right here. And of course I didn't take all the antique books off their hands, and I had been talking to them all the time previously to this, like the whole be helpful, be kind, all that stuff that I mentioned, another tip. I was nice the entire time. They knew me well enough to know that I wasn't going to be a dirtbag, and I was like, yeah, I'll give you guys this much for these antique books. And they're like, oh yeah, sure, because if you're not buying them for this price, we actually are throwing them away at the end of the day. Well, they didn't actually say throw away. They said the semi-truck was going to come to put it in recycling. But at the end of the day, that's the same thing for a book. Death is death is death. And for antique books, as I talk about in all these videos, is if we're not saving antique books or just books in general, they're getting thrown away, they're getting recycled, and no one's going to be able to ever read them again. And for antique books, where you might be holding the very last copy of this particular book, it's sort of important to think that you might be saving this from its end of life before it ceases to exist altogether. So that's just something that's pretty neat. And because they had known me and because I was confident and that sort of stuff, they gave me the deal that I wanted, and I was very happy. And honestly, I think this is really weird, but when I give more confident offers, not just a, hey, what if you gave me this as a deal? What if you, and instead of saying something like that, be like, I'll give you X much. And don't say it as a question. And something that I actually heard recently about millennials, and for me, I get called a millennial, but I'm actually a Gen Zer, I think it is. I don't know. It depends on the day and depends on how they change the bracket, but I think I'm a Gen Zer. But something they say about my generation is we always end our sentences going up at the end, and when your voice influctuates higher at the end of something, it's a question. So, what is your name? It's when you get louder at the end, and you do that to emphasize a question mark, and that's how English sort of works. So something they say about my generation is we end all of our sentences like that, and we do that to be like less aggressive, less all these things to sound less, I don't know, like less offensive maybe, I don't know. But evidently that's a thing with us. So when I'm talking, I personally don't have an issue with that, but if you guys are millennials or anything like that, and if you have a way of always ending your sentences where it sounds like a question even though it's not, that's something that you might want to push down, at least for now, probably forever, because confidence really is an important thing. But it's something you want to push down when you're doing your offer because you want to sound confident. And confidence does not sound like this. It sounds like this. It's when you sound monotone. It's when you sound happy. It's not something that makes you sound skittish. So you don't want to sound skittish. You want to sound confident. And all that has to do with confidence is key. On to the next tip really quick. Know when to walk. So I actually have a funny story, which is for something I didn't even want to buy. But I was actually going to this one estate sale. I didn't buy anything at this particular one because their prices were like through the moon. And I was like, whatever. But there was one place that I went to. I went with my mom because that was when we had just started bringing her onto the business. And I was like, ooh, let's go to this one estate sale. It has these cool books that I was looking at. And I looked at those books and they were everything I thought they were. But the problem was they were asking like more than what I could resell them for. And sometimes you get the vibe where they won't negotiate on prices. And this was one of those places. But one of the things they had, the seller guy that was running the estate sale, saw us and we were looking around at the other things because I honestly just enjoy looking at other antiques. And he saw us just walk by a Persian rug. We weren't even looking at the Persian rugs because for me, I don't care for Persian rugs at all. Like, I don't care about rugs. Like, I'll just buy one from Costco. Let's be honest here, guys. Like, I don't need a $1,000 rug. And he's like, oh yes, this is a real Persian rug. The person bought it. We have the receipt right here. They bought it for $15,000 or something along those lines. And he was like, we'll sell it to you for $1,500. That's a fantastic deal. I'm like, okay, I don't care. And we engaged with him enough to not be jerks, because remember the whole thing about don't be a jerk. But we engaged and we were trying to like walk away. You can tell in a conversation, like if you have any social skills, you could tell when someone's trying to walk away from his conversation. And he could tell that because there's a lot of people with good conversational skills. And as we were doing that whole disengage conversation ending stuff, he was like, well, what if we did it for this price? What if we did it for this price? And if you guys are willing to walk away, people will oftentimes negotiate down. They'll talk down and they'll be like, hey, I'll give it to you for this deal. And they'll really, really cut down their prices. And honestly, don't do this to just be a sleazy person and try to get a deal if you don't need to do it. And if you aren't, and if you are interested, like, honestly, guys, these people are running businesses. They need to feed their family too. Don't fake disinterest. But if you really are disinterested, like at that price or in the particular thing, you can walk away. So for like my mom and I, when we were there, we were not interested in the Persian rug. We're backing away, and the guy saw we weren't interested, so he's trying to push the sale. It didn't work for us because we weren't interested at all. It wasn't a price thing. But for when you are doing something that you are interested in and price is just the issue, you can be like, hey, I'll pay $50 for this book. And if they say no, you could be like, well, I can't take it for anything over $50, so I'll just put it back. And if you put it back, or if you wait some time before trying again, they might end up coming out to meet you and be like, hey, we will do that deal now. But again, guys, don't fake your disinterest, but trust me, you can get some pretty good deals if you actually are disinterested, mostly because of price, but because of other stuff too. So all that said and done, on to the next tip. All right, my next tip is find the right person. So I know this sounds like a weird sort of tip, but when you're at an estate sale, generally they have a team of people running these estate sales. And honestly, like if you've done it a couple times, you can sort of pick out who is the right person just by walking in. You can see who they are and that sort of stuff. But when you go to estate sales, there are going to be the employees. There's going to be the children that are finagled into working for the family business. There's going to be the husband or wife that doesn't care too much about it. And then there's going to be the husband or wife who is going to be all about the business, and it's sort of their business and it's their brainchild and it's their everything. And honestly, guys, that's the person that you want to go for. You want to go for the number one. You want to go for the person who's calling the shots. You want to go for the person who this is their business. They're passionate about it. They're excited about it. And the reason is because those are going to be the people that first off have the authority to negotiate with you. And second off, they're going to have the will to negotiate with you. And third off, this is like sort of a iffy one, but odds are they're going to be the person that did the research to look up the price for these things. So I'm actually going to reference another sale that I've mentioned a couple times now for this video. So that gated community house that I went to, the particular set that I got of the O. Henry books, the guy who was sort of in charge of the business, I'm pretty sure is split between him and his wife, like 50-50, but you could tell it was probably more his interest than hers. But at this particular one, I was like, all right, so this particular set of books does not have a price on it. Generally, if you don't have a price on the books and if it doesn't say X much for every single book, that means that either it's going to be something they forgot about, or something they have a special price for that they don't want to tell you until you get to the cash register for. So I knew it was going to be that way with this particular book because of the sale, and also because I've actually done estate sales with this particular place before, and I actually really enjoy the company, and honestly, I do look out for them whenever I can, because again, they're a really good company. You guys are going to find that same sort of thing when you're doing your businesses, is you're going to find some of these estate sales that you just love. But for me, I had these books and I was like, yeah, so how much do you want for these? And he's like, oh, I know that these can sell for this much and I am thinking this price. And I was like, all right, so I'm a reseller, I definitely agree with that price. And for this particular one, I didn't have to negotiate because he told me $25 for that particular set. Not the same one that I just mentioned about the $25, that would have been $84, but this was a totally different set of books. And he's like, yeah, $25. And for me, that was actually the price that I was shooting for. You guys would be surprised how many times that actually happens. But I was like, oh yeah, I could totally swing 25 because I'm selling it right now for $100. So I was really happy with that. But for me, I knew that he was the guy to negotiate with. And on top of that, they actually had employees who were like, oh yeah, since that doesn't have a price, you have to talk to the big man, and directed me to him. And I was like, well, I wasn't going to talk to him either anyway, so works for me. But yeah, you guys have to look out for the person in charge. So with that one sort of being a botched example, let me go on to another example, which was another botched one, this for a different reason. So there was a Friends of the Library sale that I went to up in Washington, like Eastern Washington, and there was actually a bunch of books. It's one estate sale that I've actually, sorry, not estate sale, Friends of the Library sale that I've actually been to a couple times now. It's a really good one. It's one that I've had a lot of luck with. And when I was there was an employee, lady, not actually employee, it's a volunteer, sorry, and she was accepting all the money, and she was sort of a laissez-faire, let it be, live and let live sort of thing, and it was someone that I could tell I could negotiate with. And I was keeping an eye on her. I was like, all right, she's the only one here. I'm going to get a good deal potentially. I'll hit her up as soon as I finish going through all these books. And for me, this particular estate sale, sorry, Friends of the Library sale, keep messing up. This particular Friends of the Library sale, though, probably had like 30,000 books. It's a pretty good sized sale. So I was going through all the things, I was checking out, I was grabbing all the things I wanted. I actually just sold a book from that from that sale that I bought for like 50 cents or something. I just sold it for $20. It was the first edition of one of the Ramona Quimby books. I was sort of happy to see that one sell because it was an ex-library book. So generally you think those books don't have much value, and it's like, oh, it's an ex-library, it has stamps, it has this, it has this. But you'd be surprised, you can actually sell those for a pretty good price. And since I paid 50 cents and sold it for $20, that's a pretty good profit margin. So guys, I know this is total aside, but don't ignore ex-library books. And again, you'll be able to notice which ones those are. They'll have like the barcode on them. They'll have all these ugly markings. If it's a good book, it shouldn't affect the value that much. Of course, there are some books where if it's ex-library, it'll just crash the value and it won't be worth anything. But there are some that it'll still be worth a good chunk of money. So you'll get an eye for it as you do this business a little bit longer. And I'll explain in other videos sort of how that eye for things works. And if you'd like to hear what I sort of do, be sure to subscribe below. I'll tell you how to get the eye, and I'll walk you through this whole business, because everything that I have, all the information is free for this entire thing, all on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe. But back to this particular thing. Back to the sale entirely, actually. So I was keeping an eye on her, and eventually I got all the books that I wanted, and I was getting ready to pay. And then the lady that looked like she was the head of the Friends of the Library group, she walked in. And because she walked in, I was like, oh, look, she has authority. This is a good thing. And started talking to her, and I could tell right off the bat that she was sort of the type A person who was like quite a task manager. And I was like, so can I get a good deal on these particular books? No one's buying these books. So these are not the ones that I was already buying. These are different ones that I was thinking about. I think these particular ones were, let me think really quick. Yeah, there were a whole bunch of mass market paperbacks. So I actually have a side part of this particular particular antique book business where I just do some mass markets because they actually sell pretty well when you can get the right price. I got out of it for a smidge, and now I'm just trying to get my foot back into the door, and I haven't had good luck just yet, but total aside right there. I'll explain that in another video. But I was like, yeah, so no one's buying these particular mass market paperbacks. Can I take them off your hands for this much a box? And she's like, no, we're already giving you a good deal. We're not going to negotiate for this. And I was like, well, no one else is buying them, so I mean, you guys, last time I was here, you said you threw them away and da-da-da-da-da. And she's like, nope, we're not going to negotiate with that, da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, okay, sorry, I'll just buy these books here then, thank you. And I ended up paying for those books, and I know this is another example of what didn't work, but generally this particular thing does work. You have to keep an eye out for the right person, and if you find the wrong person, they won't deal with you, and if you find the right person who's right enough, like this particular estate sale guy that I talked about in the other part of this little example, they'll already give you the price, and it's going to be a good price. So again, guys, keep an eye out for the right person. They'll either give you a good price right from the beginning, or they'll negotiate with you and give you a really good price. So with that, all that said and done, I'm just going to hop on to the next part, and that is time it right. So I'm going to go back to this Friends of the Library example that I just talked about. So for me, I was actually hoping that I'd be able to get a better deal, and I did get a deal because I timed it right, because I was showing up late and I was doing this at a slow time. And for when you're timing your stuff right for when you're negotiating, you want to hit it on a slow time. And for the Friends of the Library one, as you guys already know, that didn't work out. But there are other times that it has worked out for me. So I'm just going to think really quick. So yeah, there was one estate sale that I went to, and there was like no one there because it was like halfway through the day. Everyone had already hit it. It was already like, when you've been to some estate sales, like there are some that stay sort of organized, and there's some that just get thrashed because everyone just rips things apart as they're looking at stuff. So at this particular estate sale, it was thrashed, and you could see that a lot of people had already gotten what they wanted. And I was there, I was just poking around, and I was like, ooh, these books right here look really cool. I'm happy with these. And for me, I have like really long arms. Like, I think it's funny, I actually have people comment on it, especially when I have my arm full of books, because I just like hook the bottom book here, and then I just stack all the way up my arm. So I can get like a good chunk of books in there. So I'm walking around with this big stack of books, and I'm getting a couple other books. I'm just adding to the pile because, I mean, I can lift a good amount of books because I've been doing it long enough. And the person who was, so this is back to the last topic really quick, but the right person, but they came on over, they saw me grabbing all these books because it was a slow time. No one else was at the sale. So they were just perusing, looking to see what's going on, seeing where everyone is, if anyone's there. And I was like the only person there. There was actually like one other person in the entire place, but I was there. I was with all my books, and like, oh, wow, you're taking all those. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to see if I can negotiate with you guys with these books, and then I'm going to buy these other ones, and da-da-da-da. They're like, all right, so right off the bat, I'll sell you all these books for this certain price. And for me, I was getting ready to pay like $100 for this particular set of books, like as my negotiation strategy. Like I was getting ready. I was like, all right, I'm going to get $100 for these. That's like $50 off of what they're expecting, but I think it's still pretty good. And the guy was like, oh yeah, we'll sell it to you for $10. I was like, done. I will pay right now for these books, and then I'll come right back to grab more books. And he's like, all right, sounds good to me. So that's actually what I did. I bought all those books. I put them straight in my car. I was like so stinking stoked, and I've actually made, so that particular $10 expense, I have actually made like, I'm going to say 40 times over. So I've sold it for over $400 because I've been parsing out that particular set. So I've been really ecstatic about this one. So it's been a really good set for me. So if you time it right, and if you're going at a slow time, the people will be looking around trying to give bargains to try to push more sales. And for me, I actually got to get a better sale. And after getting all those books, I actually went back into the place as I promised. I grabbed a few more books, not as big of a pile. It's probably only yay big. And then I found some like old pewter glass, like goblets. I've never heard of pewter before, but it's a metal, and it's for like fancier glasses, and they had like this cool folding box with this pretty felt thing. I was like, oh wow, this is really cool. And I looked it up, and I could get like $70 or something. Maybe it might have been like $150. I don't know, somewhere in there. But saw it, and I was like, oh yeah. Saw the price. I was like, all right. And grabbed all those things, and I was like, all right, I'll buy these two. And again, because it was a slow time, it wasn't just me negotiating. I mean, I was going to negotiate. I did negotiate on these things, but they were also just really willing to part with stuff for great prices because they were wanting to see stuff move because it was slow. And when stuff is slow, they're not selling. And when they're not selling, they're not making money. So if they can close more deals, it actually behooves them to be pushing sales. So if you're timing stuff right and you're going at a slow time for the sale, or if you wait to pay until a slow time, you can really make some really good money. So all that said and done, I'm going to move on to the next part, and that's don't overdo it. So remember that one set of books that was yay long that I told you guys how I was going to pay $100 for. Again, they probably would have wanted $150. And I know I've mentioned this before, so $100, that's about a third off. Again, that is just a price that I have found a whole lot of luck with. And it's not something that I like do the math for. I'm like, all right, so technically I need to da-da-da-da-da. It's not something I do that for. It's just like rough numbers. It's like, all right, roughly a third off, roughly 25% off. You know, you could run those numbers in your head pretty easy. And I was like, all right, so I think $100 is a pretty good price for these books. So that's what I'm willing to pay. And I was ready to pay that. And when I was doing that, $100 for all those books, that's a pretty good deal for them still. I mean, that's not insane. Whereas if I offered $10, that would have been insane. Sure, that's what I got it for in the end, but that's a caveat. But at the end of the day, guys, when you are buying these books or whatever else you're buying, you don't want to overdo it with your initial offer because you'll A, make the person mad or sad, or B, they'll just get annoyed with you because they have enough people that walk into places and offer them really stupid prices. Like I've walked into some places and there's someone that grabs something that's clearly expensive. I've seen some things that are actually like gold plated and whatnot, and they're like, oh, I'll pay you this much for it. And it's like, bro, the gold value alone in that thing is X much. So like, what are you doing? And obviously the person doing the sale understands that as well. And they're just like, no. And usually I have found that when you give something that's like an offensively low price, people won't negotiate at all with you. Like they'll be like, you're paying full price, period. And a fun story that I actually thought was pretty interesting and a little bit annoying, and like it always gives me a yucky feeling when I see stuff like this. But the particular sale that I talked about earlier, where I got the Oxford books for $25, there was actually another guy paying, so they had two cash registers going, and the other guy that was paying next to me, he had this cool little toy car thing, and he was like, oh yeah, how much do you want for this thing? And they're like, oh, pretty sure we put a price on that. Where's the price tag? And they sent out a runner because a lot of these places have extra employees who can be runners. And they went and found the box the guy pulled it out of that had the price tag on it. And they're like, well, the price tag that was on the box that you took this out of said $14. So we'll take $14. And the guy, you could tell, was wanting, I think he even said that he wanted it for like $3 or something. So he's like, oh no, I can't do $14, da 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 da. And they would not budge on the price because they saw, first off, the guy was trying to steal it from them. And they also knew, because they had already checked the price, they knew he was trying to undercut them in a big way. He was being a jerk, which takes me back to the whole thing of be a nice person, don't be a jerk. So when you're doing it, don't overdo it. First off, don't be dishonest. Don't try to steal from them. But like, don't overdo it when you're doing the price drops. So this particular toy car, I've seen them online before for like $80 at least. So $14, which is what they wanted, that was a pretty good price off from the beginning. So to want $3 off, to want $3 for it in the entirety, I mean, that's pretty stinking lame, and it's definitely overdoing it in a big, big way. So don't overdo it when you're trying to do your prices, or else they're going to first off think you're a jerk. They actually laughed about the guy later because they knew he tried to steal from them, but all that sort of stuff. So don't overdo it when you guys are doing it, and again, don't be dishonest. All right, so the next very important detail that I have for when you're negotiating for books is, or anything in general, is be sure to point out the various imperfections in the books. So for me, I'm just going to grab a book really quick. So this book is not one that I negotiated for, but I think it'll show the examples of what I like to point out when I'm selling these books. So this is possibly not the best example because this book is a really old book, so it's going to have the wear and tear that other books don't have. But again, it's just a pretty good example of what you might want to point out. So right off the bat, I'm just going to show you guys this. So you can see the cover right here, how it wobbles so much. And that's because of the binding on this book. It's definitely not stood the test of time as well as it maybe could have. So you might be able to see right here, the cover in the text box is, text block is completely detached. All that's holding it together is this like cheesecloth sort of thing going on. And when I was buying this book, it was something I was thinking about negotiating for, but I was there during a busy time and I had to go somewhere else before I could really negotiate. So it's not something that I negotiated on, but it was a pretty good score for me anyways. But it was something I could have pointed out a lot of issues on. So another issue is you could see the corners of this book, they're dinged up. Honestly, so this is a hardcover book, but along the edges especially, the hardness actually pretty soft because it's been dropped, it's been shuffled around, it's been beat up. You can see a lot of strings along the top because it's so used, it's so well read, and that's a lot of stuff that you might want to point out when you're looking at these various things. You want to point out imperfections. So something that this book does not have a lot of is torn pages. So here is a very, very tiny tear. You guys probably won't even be able to see it at all on the video, but if there's tears on pages, that's something you want to point out. You want to also point out water damage. So this book does not have any water damage, but water damage is something that will really affect the value of a book. But if you're grabbing something and if it's clearly all sorts of ratty, you'll be able to get a pretty good deal for it potentially. Or depending on the book, they might not want to negotiate at all because they will be like, yeah, we know the condition and this is how much we want for it because of yada, yada, yada. But when you're negotiating, you can be like, hey, so for that particular book, you want $15 for that. And $15 is actually more than I spent for most of my books. I think that's actually second highest I've ever spent for a book. The highest was 25, but 15, pretty stinking high. Generally, I normally only pay $2 a book. And for me, though, $15, I was getting ready to negotiate. Sadly, I was there during a really busy time, so I couldn't, because remember what I said earlier about you got to time it right. But I was getting ready to negotiate. I was going to be like, hey, I'll give you $7 for that. And something bad about that particular estate sale is they wanted a whole lot of money for all their books. So I wasn't sure how much I was going to be able to budge them, but I was getting ready to negotiate. Sadly, I couldn't, but I was going to point out, hey, so this cover is this is this, da 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 da. And I was also going to say, as one of the things, I know it's not going to show up on camera, so I'm not going to show you guys, but there was a whole lot of fading on the cover. So not only was the cover worn, but it was very faded. So even in the picture that I saw this particular book on, when I was looking at the different estate sales that I wanted to go to, I saw it. I couldn't even read the spine, but I had a good feeling of what book it was. So I just got some quick comps on that particular book, and I pulled up the comps, and I knew that I wanted that one, basically regardless of price, because I am going to be able to sell it for really good money. I'm thinking at least $150. I might go as low as $100, but I can probably be getting a whole lot more for that particular book. So that's something you guys want to play with in your heads as you're doing these things. But I was getting ready to negotiate because it's not the best condition. Of course, it's better condition than some of the other ones out there, but it's not stinking beautiful. So that's something you guys want to pay attention to when you're buying anything. So for me, when I go to Goodwill Outlet, a lot of the books that I get that I score that are some of the best books I find, some of them are in tatters. Some of them have huge stains. Some of them don't have covers, and I have to find covers. I can't negotiate on those at Goodwill Outlet because Goodwill Outlet doesn't let me do that. But at the estate sales, at the Friends of Library sales, at all these other places you can go to, usually it's like non-corporate ones, so it's like small businesses. Generally, you can negotiate on those things. So just a pro tip right there. Be sure to point out the imperfections. Your next tip is show disinterest. So this is something that I already talked about earlier with the whole guy who wanted to sell us the Persian rug. So we weren't interested, and because we weren't interested, he was dropping the price. He was trying to push the sale. And I know this is a whole lot like the whole know when to walk away sort of tip that I already gave, but this one's slightly different. And it's not that different in the context of how I'm explaining it, but it is a difference. And for me, when I'm buying books, so this particular set of books that I showed you guys already, the Blue Oxfords, the reason why I keep referencing some of these is because they're the recent ones that I have. I don't want to reference too many things from like 5 years ago when I started the business. But the Blue Oxford books, when I bought those, I was like, yeah, I grabbed this whole set. I don't know. And I was showing that I wasn't completely interested. I didn't explain that I was ready to walk away. I didn't explain that I was going to walk away. I didn't explain I was going to put them back for them. But I was showing, yeah, I'm not entirely sold. I was like, yeah, I'm not sure how much money I can make on those. So can I get a good bargain on that? And I was being totally out front with them. I was like, yeah, so this is sort of my thing. I'm not that interested. And because I was showing that I wasn't as sold on those books, I mean, I had grabbed all the other books by then. I had actually put them on hold because I was interested in all the other ones. So they knew I was interested in all the other books. But these particular ones they could see, I was like a little iffy on. So that's one of the reasons why they probably got the deal that I got. Honestly, I did not expect to get as good of a deal, as I already mentioned, but I got a pretty good deal because they could see that I wasn't entirely sold on these books. So that's something that you guys want to do if you're not sold on something. Like, some people go to acting school and whatnot. Some people go to like communication school. So I actually went to some communication classes in college, and in elementary school and whatnot. I actually went to speech classes because I could not speak for the life of me. I couldn't say my ahs, and I had all these lisps, and it was really, really bad. So as you guys can tell, I've sort of learned how to talk. Sometimes I still have all sorts of stutters, but that's because of concussion. So next time you guys see me stutter, don't say I'm stupid. It's because of concussion. I promise. I also got stitches in my tongue out of that one, so I got a little bit of a lisp because I have stitches in my tongue. Not right now, but I got scar tissue. It's no fun. I know, big overshare, but when you guys are buying these books, know how to use your facial expressions. So when you have something that you're excited about, show them that you're happy to be getting this thing. Like, you want to smile, you want to like have the smile express over your entire face, not just smiling with your mouth. When you just smile with your mouth, it's creepy. Like, let's be honest, guys. And when you're not interested, like, you guys want to be able to learn how to show your facial expressions. And I know that might be a little bit of like a high level pro tip, but it's definitely something you can learn. And for me, I actually first started learning the entire thing on how to use facial expressions to get sort of what I wanted a little bit more, and also just like make sure I was easier to be read by people, because when you're hard to read, people don't like talking to you as much. So if you are easy to read and if you're like expressive, people will want to talk to you more. Like, of course, don't go over the top. So like for me, when I'm doing these videos, I have to be a little bit over the top. I want to be a little more energetic, and I used to be very energetic growing up. But when you go a little too energetic, people don't like you. So you want to find a happy medium, but don't be hopey dopey, mopey dopey, whatever the word is. Don't be so slow, and don't be too excited, because those are some other things. When you're disinterested, you might want to look a little more mopey. But when you're really excited, you want to show that you're excited. And when you do those sort of things, the people you're buying the books from, they will like sort of join in on you in your excitement, in your sadness, and that sort of thing. That's how human beings work. We are communication-driven people. So that is sort of something that you can prey upon and also like build upon, is since we all sort of grab each other's emotions off of facial expressions. Like, you might not realize you do it, but psychology shows that you do. So when you guys are showing disinterest, make sure it's not just in words. Make sure it's in your face. Be like, yeah, so these books, like, you want to sort of talk out of the side of your mouth. You want to like look away a little bit. You want to look disinterested. Like, when you're interested in something, you're not taking your eyes off of it. You're reluctant to let go of it, all that sort of stuff. But when you're disinterested, you're having it at a distance. You're just like, I could take it or leave it. So that's something you want to make sure you're really pushing forward towards the people. You want to show your disinterest if you're disinterested. Now, all that said, though, don't fake disinterest. It's a dirtbag move. It's slimy. It's sleazy. All that sort of stuff. In the other video, I mentioned how in Toy Story, the guy that was trying to steal Sheriff Woody, that worked at Al's Toy Barn, he was like, oh, I'll take all this junk for you. And he was trying to act disinterested, and the lady was like, hey, that's Sheriff Woody. You're trying to steal that. And she could tell he was faking it. So don't fake it. But be sure that if you really aren't interested, be sure that your disinterest does show. Again, don't fake it. It's obvious for some people. Some people are really good actors, but again, don't lie. But yeah, be honest. And if you're not interested, don't be interested. Like, make sure they know. And with all that said and done, though, let's hop on to the next tip. The next tip is cash is king. So this is one that I talked about a lot in the last video, and it's one that's really honest. And it's when you're paying in cash. I know this is just spare change, but spare change is cash, but paper money too. When you're paying in cash, people will negotiate with you a whole lot more. I don't know entirely why this is. Like, I know a good reason, like a good part of the reason for it is because of the fees that are attached to debit cards and credit cards and all the other cards out there. There are fees for the company to use those. So that's one of the reasons why they might not want to negotiate. But I feel like another reason is it sort of feeds off of the first two things that I said, of only showing small bills and showing that you have change. When you have like that sort of stuff going on, people are more willing to negotiate. So I'm sure there's a lot of other reasons for it, and there's actually psychology reasons for how it's harder for you to spend money when you're paying in cash than when you're just paying with a card. So on top of that, that's another thing that you might want to do just for yourself, is to have all your payments in cash. It's just, you're more stingy with it, and when you're stingier, it actually helps you in business. So that's something that you guys might want to really focus on. But when you are paying, you want to pay in cash as much as you can, because the fees that come with debit cards and credit cards, it can be like 3%. It can be even higher depending on the different cards for the person that you're buying from. So because of that, they automatically are losing money off at the top. And when they're losing money off the top, they're not going to want to negotiate with you as much as if you were paying with cash, which doesn't have any attached fees. When you're paying with cash, they'll be like, oh yeah, you have this, and we're not losing any money because of this and this. So they'll want to negotiate with you guys a whole lot more. And on top of this, I mentioned this in the previous video, I do a whole lot of my buying, and odds are if you guys want to do this in a big way like I do it, and if you want to make a whole lot of profit like I do, you want to go out into the small towns. You want to go like out into the sticks, and as I like to say, out past the sticks, because where I live in Oregon, we have the cities, and like everything is forests around where I live, but we have the cities, and then you got like really dense forests, and then after that you have the high desert, you have the Oregon outback, all that sort of stuff, and I like to say all that stuff is out past the sticks because there's not as many trees out there, so the sticks being the trees, so out past the sticks. So that's what I like to say. And when I'm going out past the sticks, I mean that's like 100 miles or so from the main cities of Oregon, and when I'm going that far from the main cities, there's a lot less people going there with a lot more money. So when you're in the main cities, a lot of people have a lot more money to burn. So I live outside of Portland, so there's like everyone's house there is worth $1 million. Like it can be trash and it's still worth $1 million just because it's Portland, which I don't understand. You'd have to pay me more than $1 million to make me live there. But when you guys are going out to these small towns, you can actually get some really, really good deals for your books. But there's a caveat. All these small towns, they don't always have internet connection or cell data or any of these things. So first off, for you want to have like Google Maps really quick. So Google Maps actually has it so you can download the maps. Be sure to do that before you go on some of these long drives into some of these more rural areas, because you might not have cell reception, and if you don't have that, your maps get a little funky. But that said and done, when you don't have cell reception or internet or any of those things, and you're a business owner, you can't use debit card, you can't use credit card, because those things depend on cell connection or Wi-Fi or any of those sort of things. So that way they can actually have the transactions go through. And if you don't have any cash on hand, that means you can't buy anything. So between that and also the fact that there's different businesses, and a lot of businesses in more smaller towns, they only deal in cash, that is something that you definitely want to think about. So you want to have cash on hand, because cash, as I said, is king. And something else that's really cool, let me just check really quick. All right, so I'm sure this is not going to show up, but in the corner of the dollar right here, this is a $20 bill, but all bills, newer bills at least, since they got off the gold standard, all the bills say that this note is legal tender. And because it says that, it actually means that you can transact anything with that particular note. Like, I know people try to say, oh, you can't do it here or here or here, but at the end of the day, because of what it says on this piece of paper, it actually does mean that it's like a legal thing going on where you actually can transact whatever, whenever, with that particular paper money. Like, it's not guaranteed to last forever, because a lot of people are saying the dollar's going to die because all the stuff going on, all the hyperinflation that they're talking about, but all that's for another talk, I'm sure, and odds are I'll probably get into that in this channel a little bit more, so I'll probably bother you guys with economic stuff because that's one of my interests. So all that said and done though, guys, cash really is king. Be sure to carry around cash. As you heard, I can carry around as much as like $3,000 sometimes on some trips. I don't always do that, but I like to keep a few $100s on me at all times just because it's a smart thing to do. And you never know when your credit card's going to act up. Like, there are so many people who have their credit cards and they scan, and it doesn't work. And it's not because they're getting denied. It's just because the card is funkadoodle sometimes. So cash, it's a good fallback plan. Or if you're like me, it's your only plan, because I don't like debit cards. All that said and done, though, let me hop on to the next sort of thing. So the next tip is have the other person, the person you're buying from, have them set the price. And I know I've already mentioned this sort of story a couple times before, but I've walked up to these people and I've been like, hey, what deal can you give me for these books? So you guys remember how at that one estate sale, how I got all the books for free. You remember the one where I got the Oxford books for $25. You remember all the different things where they set the price and it's what I wanted. And you guys would be surprised how many times you can actually get the exact price that you want, or even less than you want. So remember that one set of the Charles Dickens books. I wanted to pay $100. I only had to pay $10. They set the price. It's something I never would have said myself, but they said it and they were good with it. So that actually has some stuff to do with psychology and other things, which I think is really cool. That's something that I sort of like studying a little bit, but not as much as economics, because economics is a little more awesome in my opinion. But when you are setting the first price as a seller, psychology says that you don't want to like make people sad. Like a lot of people, they don't thrive off of making people sad. They don't thrive off of conflict. So when they set the first price, they're doing something that they feel will not make conflict. They don't want to argue. Most people do not want to argue. So when they're giving you that first price, it's something that they think you're going to take. They are doing something that you're not going to get mad about, that you're not going to be like, oh, well, what about this counter offer? It's generally a really good price. And honestly, I personally prefer accepting people at the first price just because it's sort of nice to do, and also because the price is really good usually for me. But that's just something that you guys might really want to pay attention to, is they will give you some really good prices sometimes, and it's prices that you sometimes don't even imagine doing. And I might recommend doing it elsewhere as well. Like, you might want to walk up to your boss one day and be like, hey, I'd like a raise. And they're like, how much? And you're like, well, how much do you think my time is worth? And if you have a good boss, they might actually give you a higher raise than what you expected. I've actually had that one work for me too when I worked in a couple other places. So all that said and done, guys, pro tip, have other people set the price first. Don't be the first person to say the price. So I know I just said I was going to wrap that up, but another caveat. So I actually heard something interesting about this particular tip semi-recently, and that particular thing was like tips on how to be a good man. And these tips to be a good man was like something that was more like a good man 50 years ago, because nowadays dudes are like lamer than lame. But like 50 years ago, they were a little bit cooler. And the guy was explaining all these different things, like always open the door, always do this. And one of the things was, yeah, never accept people's first offer. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So that said and done, guys, that's the end of the tip. So always have the other person set the first price when you're negotiating. My next tip is know your market. So this is a multi-pronged thing, and it really ties into the next tip, and it ties into a lot of the other tips I've already given. But knowing your market, knowing the market of what you're buying really does matter when you're trying to negotiate for your stuff. So for me, as I've said many times in this video and many times in my channel, I try to buy my books for $2 or less like 99% of the time. And because I do that as my average, I know that that's sort of the average for all the books in all of my general region. So for me, that's like all the way down to Salem, all the way over to Gresham-ish, all the way up to Vancouver. Like, I'm used to paying about $2 for every single book. And then I get a little bit further out, and that drops to about $1.50. Get a little bit further out, that drops to $1. Get a little further out, it can get as low as 50 cents when I get far enough away from the city. And that really does help my bottom line. But because I have done this long enough, I really know that I know my market. And it's something that you guys really have to figure out when you're doing your own markets. Because when you know your market well enough, you can use that in negotiations. So when I go to estate sales, if they're asking for a whole lot of money for every book, I'll be like, hey, most places only charge $2 for the books around here. So these are really, really high prices. Is there any way that you can match $2? And I have had good luck where they either say, yeah, I guess I can do that, especially when it's the slower time or towards the end of the sale. They can do that a whole lot more often. And I get some really good deals. And honestly, guys, it's really stinking nice because I am able to make a whole lot more money. I'm able to buy a whole lot more books. So for me, I make my money when I buy some of these books because I'm able to sell these books for $100, for $200, for $1,000, depending on the book. And getting it down to just $2 that I pay makes it so I can buy books that are, say, just $20 profit or just $40 profit. And that kind of profit's still really good money. I mean, it's not as exciting as the $200, $300, $500. It's not as exciting as that kind of profit margin, but it can really make or break some of these sales for me. And because I know my market, I'm able to be like, hey, so this is like not normal. And you guys would be surprised how often people actually do budge on their prices. Of course, there are always the places that don't budge, and it's a little bit of a bummer, but there are plenty of places that do. So that's done. That's that tip. So on to the next one, which sort of meshes in, and that is know your margins. So if you aren't aware of how much money you can sell stuff for or how much money that you end up making after your sale, it really interrupts and disrupts how you can negotiate because you don't really know what you need to buy these books for. So for me, at the very beginning of me doing this business, my margins were I'd make about $2 for every single book because I was doing Amazon FBA, and I was used to having like $2 margin for a book being nice. I was used to having like $15 margin of just profit being on the higher end. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll just buy all these eBay books. And I'd buy all the books and it was nice and I still made some profit, but it was like not very exciting for me. So I was like, well, I find that when I go to these different estate sales, I can go through 100 books and I can find 3 that are worth it. So that's just a very rough number on what I can tend to keep. But like 3 out of every 100 are like really good winners for me. And by really good, I make like at least $50 a piece for these books. And I was like, well, what if I shifted my eBay business to just include those higher margin books? And because I was able to shift and pivot, I was able to change how I negotiated, because no longer was I worried about buying a book for $1.50 instead of $2. I was able to be like, well, I could swing $2. And when I'm negotiating with people, I mean, they'd rather hear $2 than $1.50. So it has made me a little bit easier to negotiate because I'm able to pay a higher price because I've raised my margins and because I'm so aware of my margins and that sort of stuff. But another thing is it just sort of plays into the whole confidence thing and mentioning how you are. I know this is like a culmination of all the other things I've talked about, but it's like when you know your margins well enough, you can explain your situation, you can explain how you're not making money, you can tell the people what's going on and why you can't pay a certain price, and they'll understand because you understand. And when you understand something, you can explain it a whole lot better. So that's probably why I haven't made this the best video ever, is maybe I don't understand everything 100%. I hope I explained it well enough that it makes some sense. Judging by how well the previous video, the 19 tips, is done, I'm thinking I'm pretty good at this, but you guys really got to know your margins. And as I was mentioning earlier in the previous video, one of the things about margins and knowing your market is, as I explained in the other one, the $200 couch. Maybe it's worth this much, maybe it's worth this much. But if you know your market, you know that the couch is only worth 25 used, and then you might be able to sell it for 150, but the person selling it definitely can't sell it for that price because they don't have the market, they don't have the experience, they don't have this and this and this. So when you guys are doing these things, you have to know your margins so you can know what you can offer, can know how much money you can make. And another thing that's really important for margin, especially if you're doing stuff like me where you're going on these long drives, you have to factor in the drive time, you have to factor in the gas, you have to factor in all the different expenses that you have for going that far. And it's not really the business's fault that you did all that driving, but it is something that you want to consider when you're making your offers. You have to be like, hey, so I just came this far and I can't make money if you do, but I can if you do. So you sort of want to just spill the beans and explain your sort of stuff. So all that said and done, those are my 19 tips. Thank you guys for making it this far through the video. I know this was an insanely long video, but I really felt like some people would really enjoy the longer form where I really dove in and explained stuff a little bit deeper, because for me personally, I like having more data, and more data sometimes takes a lot more time. So all that said and done, I hope that you guys can subscribe if you want to learn more about antique book businesses or eBay businesses in general, or anything else that I really talked about in this video, because I will talk a lot more on everything that I talked about, because negotiating and estate sales and all that sort of stuff is like an integral part in doing your eBay business. One of the videos I'll be doing in the future is going to be on accepting offers and counter offers and all that stuff on eBay. So if you're interested in eBay businesses in general, that really is something that you guys want to pay attention to. So please, again, subscribe below and be sure to check out one of the other videos, and be sure to subscribe with that little badge if you guys want, wherever that thing is. So I'll see you guys in the next video.